I don't have the book with me. I don't know what happened to my copy. It was pretty worn out, full of notes and dog ears. And at this point, I'd have no idea where it's at, especially from all this moving around. So just pretend that I have the book and that I'm showing it, and it's got a great cover. And it's awesome. Today we are talking about two very different books. First, I'm going to review a fiction book that has been one of the most banned books pretty much since its release. That one is called Tricks by Ellen Hopkins. So let's get into that first. I feel like at this point, most people have heard of this book, or at least one of Ellen Hopkins' books. One, their covers are pretty noticeable wherever they are. And two, they are really, really banned. Most, if not all of them, are about super triggering things. All of them are about various terrible things like addiction and assault, things of that nature. And Tricks has plenty of that. Surprisingly, I barely heard of this book maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. And I really wish that I had known about it as a teenager, because it would have helped me connect and not feel so alone in some of the things that I went through. Not that I went through anything like as crazy as the characters in these books, but I had similar events within my family and friend groups. So it would have been really nice to be able to connect and see that it wasn't just my life that was this chaotic. But let's get more into the book. The story centers on 5 teenagers, and each chapter is dedicated to one of their points of view. At first, they are living completely different lives, completely disconnected from each other, until eventually they all converge into one story. And each of those characters goes through some basically, each one of their plots leads to them being kicked out or having to run away from their home. One character is having premarital sex and her parents are super religious, so they send her to, I don't know what you call it, basically like a rehab for religious people where they teach you to be pure. That's the best way that I can put it, because I'm not really familiar with religion. Another character, one of the gay characters, gets kicked out for being gay. Here would be a good spot to mention that I don't feel like it's a fully queer book because it's divided by each character. So one of the characters is queer. I think actually 2 of them might be. Other ones delve into queerness, explore it a little bit, whether they end up being straight or not. They still explore queerness. I think overall it would be considered a queer book, but it's not like overtly queer. Another character gets raped repeatedly because her mother charges people to rape her daughter. Yeah, it's that fucking dark. So plenty of trigger warnings on this. If you're not into reading that kind of stuff, don't read this book. I will say, though, that the scenes are not gratuitous. They're not super detailed about it. They just kind of mention what happens and the aftermath of it, rather than going into super detail. Another of the character has their stepfather die, or I think their father die, and so they kind of have to be the man of the house. But the teenager has a gambling addiction, so loses all the family money and has to figure out a way to generate more income. And the final character is female and falls in love with her best friend, who's also female. So she tries to navigate what her queer awakening is. So what she ends up doing is they both run away to Vegas. Actually, all the characters end up in Vegas. Whatever circumstance that they were in, whatever issues that they were having, it leads to them all meeting in Las Vegas, Nevada. And what's legal there? Well, I guess most things are. Sex work is legal there. All of these characters end up pursuing sex work. Some by choice, some feel like that they have to because all their other options are exhausted, and some are forced to. Yeah, it's a really dark book. There's not a lot of redeeming factors in it. It's not a happy story. But I know as a teenager, I really could not connect to happy stories because to me, they weren't realistic. I know that sounds super f***ed up. For people that have a lot of trauma, especially in the younger years, it really helps to be able to connect and see that you're not the only one who has trauma. And this book is for those people. Anyone that's had to deal with any of the things that I've talked about that these characters experience will connect with this book because it makes you feel just less alone, and that as up as it is, a lot of these things are pretty common. They're pretty normal. They're just not talked about, and they're definitely not talked about in happy ending books. That's why I think it's ridiculous to ban books. Well, There's a lot of reasons why that's really ridiculous. To ban books because you don't agree with the content or you feel like it's too heavy content, that's just like a really stupid reason to be banning books. Just because you don't connect with it doesn't mean somebody else isn't going to connect with it. You know, how many vampire romance books with happy endings can we possibly have? How many dragon books can we possibly have? Having something about addiction and assault and how to survive those things is super helpful for a lot of people. I think my biggest argument for this book, for it to not be banned, is because it doesn't glorify any of these things. It doesn't glorify addiction. It doesn't glorify drugs or alcohol or religious abuse. It doesn't glorify any of that. In fact, it actually shows how horrible and miserable it can be. And that's not knocking anyone that's into sex work. But I am trying to say that being forced into it is not ideal. It's not good. Or feeling like it's your only option, also not good. And I think Ellen Hopkins really highlights that. Like, this is a gritty book. This isn't, even when I'm reading it, I don't picture bright colors and things like that. I just picture it really, really dark and bland and just really kind of gross at some parts. Gritty is the word. Gross isn't the word. Really gritty. This book is part of a 2-part series. It has a sequel, but also Ellen Hopkins' other books have a lot of the same characters. She almost has like her own little universe here. If you're into that kind of stuff, to reading about similar characters, the same characters, and seeing different journeys of those characters, I definitely would check out her books. If you're interested in a deeper review of Tricks and other banned books, check out my article for Zhive magazine, where I have a column of banned book reviews. I also have other articles I've written, like Finding Love at a Sabrina Carpenter concert, reviews of clothing brands for diverse bodies, a list of LGBTQ+ activists, and so much more. All right, let's see this next book. Let's do this one. Okay, the next book I actually do have a copy of, and in honor of it being Wrestlemania month, it is a memoir about a gay WWE wrestler. I'm sure so many people are rolling their eyes right now, because why would they want to read about a gay wrestler? Pro wrestling is such a niche subject that it's probably not interesting. Well, you're wrong. It's super interesting. Actually, I don't know if it is, but I love pro wrestling, and reading this book, doing this review, coincides with the El Paso and pro wrestling video that I uploaded earlier this month. This is where I really want to sell nonfiction and memoir books onto viewers, because it doesn't matter what walk of life you're from. Everyone has a story, and learning about other people's lives in a narrative way is so much fun. So yeah, it's about pro wrestling, but it's about this man's life and things that he went through, and the things that he learned, his relationships, and his values. It just happens to be on the backdrop of pro wrestling. So it's like there's something here for everyone. For wrestling fans, they'll already know Pat Patterson. And for non-wrestling fans, it's an opportunity to learn about an entirely different world while still being able to connect with the character. And that's how you make a strong memoir. Because if it's someone you don't even know or you're not familiar with, you should still be able to see the strong, powerful story within it. All right, so Pat Patterson, super old. He's passed away now. He's, I think, a few years ago. But he was really big in the 70s and 80s, like on top of the pro wrestling world in certain areas. And he was gay the entire time, obviously the entire time. He also had a partner. So it was kind of like an open secret of him being gay in a world that was pretty much like a fraternity, a boys club, a really toxic industry where being gay was not accepted. Pat Patterson claims that he was pretty accepted in a lot of places. And when he wasn't, he tried to earn people's respect. I don't know if I agree with doing that. For example, he says, like, so each area of the United States had wrestling promoters, which basically ran wrestling shows. And some of them would be homophobic, but would still hire him because he was so popular and he would draw money. Which, number one thing, rainbow capitalism, as long as you can generate someone money, you matter. And that's the United States. So basically, Pat Patterson mattered to a lot of these people strictly because he could draw money. However, they would still be homophobic towards him. But his response was never to fight or to get angry. His response was, I'm going to make myself undeniable. I'm going to work so hard and draw so much money that you cannot deny me, that you're going to have to accept me. God, I really don't think I agree with that, because why would I be exploited and make someone else money who hates me for who I am? I'm all for earning respect, but not at the expense of exploitation. The memoir goes through the years of him basically working his way up in the ranks of pro wrestling to become world champion, and some of the issues that he had to face during that. One of the coolest things about this book and Pat Patterson is that him and his partner were together during the 80s, which was a time of the AIDS epidemic. For any queer person to survive the AIDS crisis, that's a huge deal, because most people didn't. So the fact that they got through that, and especially in the wrestling industry where a lot of wrestlers get injured in the ring or they bleed, and there's a lot of like blood mixing and things like that at a time when that was not a great idea, it's really surprising that they survived, and I'm super happy about it, obviously. The book goes on through the years of Pat Patterson working his way up the ranks to become world champion in various territories, and then eventually going to the WWE. Now, in the WWE, there was a lot of issues happening. There was the Ring Boy scandal, among many other scandals that continue today. But a lot of people that worked with WWE were accused of hiring young boys to take advantage of. Pat Patterson was accused of this, and there's a lot of controversy of it because a lot of people agree and a lot of people disagree. And I think it's one of those things where just because someone is a good person in many aspects does not make them a good person in all aspects. I think Michael Jackson is a good example of that. Is I couldn't believe that so many people were like, no, he's innocent because they like his music. It's like, how are those two things related? You can like his music, but also understand that he's a human that can also do things. Just because someone makes good music or has good wrestling matches does not make them a saint in all other aspects of their life. So I don't know if he is guilty of taking advantage of young boys or not, but this book, basically, a lot of this book is him saying his side of the story. I think because there are a lot of rumors out there, there are harmful stories that hurt his reputation. This worked to clear up a lot of that. Whether that actually clears up everything, I don't know. But I am glad that he addressed a lot of the things that kind of soiled his reputation. That's also the beauty of memoirs, is that you can write your side of the stories, especially if you're in a marginalized community. I do have to mention some of the wrestling aspects that non-fans may not understand, but fans will be really happy to learn. Okay, the whole Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels rivalry, Pat Patterson's idea. He pushed for that. He also, because he was a smaller wrestler at a time when it was not popular to have small wrestlers, and there was all these jacked, beefy men on steroids, he advocated for a lot of the smaller wrestlers and continued to until the end of his life. So wrestlers like Shawn Michaels, Kofi Kingston, Daniel Bryan were all pushed heavily by Pat Patterson. He's even responsible for bringing Bret Hart back in, I think, like the 2010s, which after the Montreal Screwjob of 97, nobody ever expected Bret Hart to be back in the WWE. But y'all can thank this man. Okay, that probably meant nothing to non-wrestling fans. But just know that there's a lot of drama in wrestling. And I don't mean just in the ring, in the characters, in the scope of the storylines, but the backstage drama is just as entertaining, because these aren't just actors. They're athletes and they're performers. It's an entirely different world in pro wrestling. It's really hard to compare it to anything else. It's an industry where fact and fiction makes money when it's blended together. And the most important thing about the business is making money. So a lot of times you don't know which parts are real and which parts are staged. Sure, the action in the ring is called, but like actually working your way up the ranks and having relationships with other wrestlers and the kind of drama, backstage drama, is all very real, and sometimes even plays out in the ring. That's why I really like this book, because it talks about a lot of those things, how it works, how they work, and the result of so many crazy things that happen in the wrestling world. All right, does that sell you on a pro wrestling memoir? God, these are such niche books that I sometimes present here. And you know what? I think about it often, and I'm like, should I do more popular books? Should I do more recent books in these reviews? And honestly, like, I don't want to turn my reading into work. And I feel like if I'm reading things that I don't want to read, then it becomes work. Then it's kind of taken away from my hobby. Reading is definitely a hobby for me. I love it. And I am making these videos for some of the books that I read because I want to share that passion and that information. And I don't have a whole lot of people to talk about these books with. So I do go back and forth about, should I read something that the majority of the audience might like more? I see a lot of other people on YouTube reviewing really popular books or some of the same books over and over again, to be honest. And I don't know, I can't bring myself to do that yet. I like these niche books. These are the books that I like because like I want people to see how excited I am for these things because those are the kind of videos I like. I love seeing people excited for the things that they're reviewing or talking about, even if it's stuff that most people won't even understand. I don't know. Is that wrong? Is that like okay to think that? I don't know. Should I review other books? I'll have to think about it. But if you are liking these book reviews and the travel vlogs, please like and subscribe to my page. And if you want to get into more exclusive videos, exclusive content, check out my Patreon. Also, I hope you all watch Wrestlemania this month because that was fire. And if you want to see more wrestling content, check out my El Paso video where I actually go to a wrestling event and a Lucha Libre museum.